You're listening to the Two Sleuth Podcast, all about the business of dentistry, hosted by yours truly, Greg Esenmacher, a fixed full arch dental expert and founder of G&A Consult, speaking with industry leaders on the dental landscape from their perspective. At G&A, we specialize in transforming full arch dental practices, teaching, coaching, and training teams to deliver an exceptional patient experience, from that first call to delivering final smiles. Whether you're a practice owner, a DSO executive, or a regional leader looking to expand your full arch program, boost same-store sales, or unlock the true profitability of full arch cases, we've got you covered. Ready to see how full arch can elevate your practice? Visit the show page or book a discovery call today. Let's turn your potential into results. Welcome back, everyone. Another episode of Two Sleuth Podcast. Greg Esenmacher, your host. Super excited today. I've been waiting to get my friend David Cohen on the show, and now we have him live in studio. Welcome to the show, David. Yeah.
Thanks so much for the welcome. I'm flattered that you're waiting for me to do this eventually. I'm actually the flattered one that I'm on this podcast.
Oh, look at this. The
I look forward
humility
to it.
already. Playing to the podcast host, like his ego is just going to get you everywhere. I'm kidding. I try to check the ego at the door. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's not. Well, David Cohen, he is, with Cohen Law Firm, which the name probably he owns that law firm. They specialize in helping dentists and specialists with their legal business transactional needs. That just sounds really formal. Let's just peel that back a little bit. David, what do you really do, right? I know it's with dentists, DSOs, groups, transactions, M&A, all that good stuff. M&Ms. I'm kind of hungry. I could actually use an M&M, plain or peanut. Put that in the comments, everyone. When you blow up my socials, which do you prefer, plain or peanut M&Ms? But let's talk about that. So talk about what you're doing in this space, and we're going to get to all this stuff. But why don't you introduce yourself to my listening audience?
Yeah. Thanks so much for giving me the floor, Greg. We are a transactional business law firm, and as Greg mentioned, that's a little bit formal. So to just kind of break it down, we mainly help doctors buy and sell practices. We do the legal work to handle the transactions where a buyer or seller buys or sells a dental practice. We do over 300 of these types of transactions nationwide yearly, where we're helping a buyer or we're helping a seller draft or review the legal documents to effectuate a purchase and sale of a practice. We do about half bar deals as DSO deals, where we're helping a seller sell to a DSO. About half our deals are where we're helping buyers and buyers and sellers sell private practices. We do have some DSO clients, but the predominance of our DSO work is on the sell side, where we're helping the doctor seller. We also do a ton of commercial real estate work, and with leases and purchasing and selling of commercial real estate.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack there.
Well.
And I love that we're going to be able to do that here on the show today. So half and half, DSO deals and private to private, which still thriving, right? And I'm a big fan of it. I love working with DSOs. I love the work that they're doing for sure. But the private sale to private sale, I think, is an area that's still a tremendous amount of need. I don't know what the latest numbers are. What do you have the latest number? I know you speak nationally, right? You're speaking all the time. It seems like I see you more on stage than in person, but I'm sure you and your team are working hard on all those transactions representing your clients. But what is the consolidation numbers that you have that are most recent as far as consolidation in the dental industry?
It's so interesting you just brought that up, because I just was provided some updated numbers and I haven't looked at them yet. So I don't want to say the wrong thing when I haven't looked at them yet. But what I will say is that in general, I think a lot of people believe that consolidation has been far more of the market than it actually really has. I also believe that there are many that believe consolidation will occur even more strongly as the years goes on, to the point where you're talking, 90% of practices will be DSOs. I don't agree with that, and I don't think that will ever happen. But as far as like the current numbers are concerned, I think they show that. I think they show that consolidation has not nearly been as grand as those sort of like think in terms of like the takeover is concerned. There's still a ton of healthy private doctor deals. We see them in my firm every day. And I think that they're going to be here to stay. And I think that there is, um, I think we've seen over the last 2 years a correction in the DSO market. DSO deals are still going very strong. And I think that DSOs will always play a massive role and have done a lot of great things and will be here. But there has been a correction over the last year or two in the DSO market. And that's just the natural ebb and flow. 3 years ago, the DSO deals were insane. I mean, we did, I can't even like, I'm trying to think back to how many we did that year. I mean, we did probably like 200 DSO deals. Like, it was insane. And then there's going to be a natural correction to that. It doesn't mean that DSO deals are always going to be what they were 3 years ago. And it doesn't mean that they're going to be what they are in the correction stage. And I think this year there's more of a bounce back that we're seeing with our firm from that correction stage to where it's kind of ticking back up to where you'd expect it to be. So in summary, I would say I think that this is a long way of answering your question. I'm doing it because I don't have the exact stats right in front of me, but I think the consolidation has not been as much as people would think. I do think there's going to be more consolidation. Is there going to be more consolidation to the extent that it wipes out all private practice? No, I don't think that will be the case. I think both are healthy, and there's going to be your ebbs and flows and corrections,
I can
and that's
appreciate
just
that
part
answer
of the
a
market.
lot because I know for myself, and I spend a lot of time reaching with other individuals and listening at conferences, and this is a big piece of what clients of mine, as they're building up in full arch and in implant dentistry, it's a big piece of what they're attempting, right? Is to build up the value, build up their EBITDA, and eventually sell. Some are just continuing to grow, but ultimately that is the prize that they're looking at, and they're accumulating, right? They're either buying more practices, buying some that are, I don't want to say distressed, but are lower in value, and turning around and adding the auxiliary services, whether it's sleep, clear aligners, or more implant therapy and full arch therapy to their general dentistry practices. Somewhere between 25 and 32% are the numbers of consolidation that I've heard. I don't know if that's exactly accurate. That's kind of the numbers I've been going off of. But what I know to be true is that, this big boogeyman fear of it's going to be like in the medical community of 90%, consolidation in X number of years. And I'm in the same camp that you are, that I just don't believe that that is what will happen. I think helping individual locations, practices, clinicians to stay competitive is a big piece of what we do at G&A Consult, but also working with those groups, emerging groups, DSOs, and how can they still stay patient focused and patient care focused, and what does that look like? And so I think that's extremely important. I want to touch on something you'd mentioned it right up in the beginning, and you were talking about what your team actually does during these transactions, and help them to happen, if you will. Uh, could you just share, and let's just back it up, or back it out to maybe a 10,000 foot view, the role that you play in these transactions for clinicians that are in a sale process, or that are looking out onto the horizon of a sale process. Talk to me about what part of a team that you are in that sale process, because the legal aspect important, but it's a part of many pieces that a practice owner, an individual practice owner, would need on their side, their team. If whether it's a broker, or whether it's a CPA, somebody doing the valuation, or they can just seed it all to one person and say, you figure it out and you build the team. So if they want to be, say, their own general contractor, like if I were going to do an add-on to my house, talk to me about what that team looks like of you working with others in order to actuate on that sale.
Yeah, usually in every type of purchase and sale transaction that we're involved in, there are going to be CPAs involved, both for the seller and for the buyer in the deal. For the seller, they need to make sure that the deal is, it underwrites for them. Excuse me, that the deal underwrites for them. And
Bless you.
also,
Was that a sneeze or a cough?
this is a cough. Um, had some dry throat there. Yeah, so the dot, and I don't know, I got young kids, so I feel like I'm sick 360 days a year out of
Oh, well, let's talk
365.
about that on the podcast. How many kids do you
So,
have? What are their ages?
they're 6, 5, and 2. So
Oh, you've got a lot of them running around, and they're little and they're busy. So I
the
can
little they're
understand why
busy
you're
and they're
never
sick.
ending.
Exactly. So sorry about that. But yeah, I mean, every deal there's going to be a CPA that's going to be involved for the seller. It's going to see if the deal underwrites for the client. They're going to look at how the money is coming in. If it's a DSO deal, how much is in cash? How much is in equity? Does that work for the client? You know, do they want to mitigate risk and change those dynamics? How does the tax affect them on the sale, the gain that they're going to receive on the sale? Um, they're going to look through all of that, right? On the buy side, the CPAs typically go look at the way that the tax allocation is on the deal, that the deal underwrites for the client, that the price is fair, and so forth. So CPAs are always going to play a big role in these deals on both sides of the deal. There's often going to be a broker involved as well. Brokers do a great job of not just matching a buyer with a seller, but also helping facilitate the transaction and being a liaison between the two sides, making sure that things are going on pace, that deliverables are made on time, and also resolving any issues that may be involved in the deal. They can be good at bridging gaps as well, because usually the brokers will, especially like in a DSO deal, they've usually worked with that buying party before, and so they know how they handle things and often can help bridge gaps easier. And if it's a private deal, they can still help bridge gaps because they're sort of like an independent third party. Other parties that we see involved in deals can be just business consultants in general. Um, Lenders, there's going to be typically be a lender all the time on a private deal. There's going to still be a lender typically in a DSO deal. It's just private equity backed typically, as opposed to, your in-town local lender or one of the big dental lenders, like the provides the Banks of Americas and so forth. So those would probably be the main teammates that we see on the deal. Of course, you're going to have for the buyer, there's going to be insurances that have to be obtained as well. And, they're going to have, insurance professionals on the deal too. But those are kind of the wide range of professionals that we see on our deals.
Well, I love it. And if you're running around trying to, corral your three kids, right? And so you're talking about three different entities you're dealing with that you've shared here, right? So it's the CPA on both sides. You're talking about a broker on the DSO side having familiarity with the way that they like things to flow. Let's just call it that. And on the private side, I would have to think that there's a big emotional piece that's involved, right? If they're a private owner and they've worked to build this for a lifetime, if you will, in many cases, and then they're transitioning out, that not only for the private owner, but it's their teams as well, and making sure their teams are cared for. That must be a part of it, I would think, with the brokers. And I know that my friend Elijah Desmond over at Dental Pitch Brokerage, it's a big part of what they do, right? They a lot of transparency with those types of pieces. And so I wanted to lift that up. And then
Yeah,
third,
absolutely.
the lender, right? There's always money involved with it. And I know there's a lot of subtlety and subtext to each of those, but I love how you pointed out those three aspects because it's easier in threes. My mind functions in threes, so I appreciate you putting that forward. So talk to me a little bit about because of the amount of volume that you see with your group and the team that you've put together. Talk to me a little bit about some of the best practices you've seen. I don't want to talk about the horror stories, although if you've got a good one, I always love a good juicy story. But talk to me about some best practices that individuals can do to put themselves in a better position to, for some of the watch outs, so they don't stumble as hard through some of this process, which can be challenging on the surface.
Well, I think the biggest thing that people can do that are going to be selling or buying a practice is surround yourself with a team. Greg, you just mentioned that it was important to point out the team members because that there's a great importance to that in these deals. Um, from my standpoint, there's no better way to be prepared to build your foundation than building your team before you start. I think it's absolutely critical because as a doctor, you either don't have the expertise to take yourself through it, or in a rare case you do, maybe there are some dentists who are lawyers out there too, or sure, there are some dentists that are like CPAs too, but it's rare. But even in those cases, they don't have should have the time to put toward it if they're really running a dental practice. So, it's critical to build a team beforehand and build a foundation. I would say that that's the number one piece of advice that I could give to anybody. And then as far as going through the process, I think it's also important before you get into that, that you understand who the counterparty is in the transaction, and whether that is going to be the best fit for you. There's so many different things to think about. From a DSO standpoint, if a seller is going to sell to a DSO, they got to know that it's the right fit for their culture, for their team, for them personally, for them financially, for their long-term vision. There's so many different types of DSOs out there, and it's really important to pick the right one, which is why, again, a broker plays a great role in that to help find the right one. Like, anybody who has a good practice can go to a DSO directly, and they're probably going to be interested in the practice. But there's an art to picking the right DSO, and you got to have a team together, including the right broker and consultants to help you get through that. So I think, just making sure that you as a client know who the other party is, if they're the right party for you, is important. And on the private side, same thing. For some sellers, it's really important for them and their legacy to make sure that the practice is bought by the right buyer who's going to come in, do right by the practice, grow it in the right way to carry on the legacy of what that seller has built over 30 years or 35 years or however long they've owned it. So, those would be the things I would think of to answer your question.
Well, and to pull out, I love that you use the word legacy because, finding the right culture fit for yourself, one thing, but the legacy, especially for those practices that have a tremendous amount of value and what we're seeing now compared to 3 years ago, right? 3 years ago, the multiples and the transactions were, it was on fire. Money was cheap. And it was insanity going on. And at GNA Consult, as we're working with practices to build more value, right? It's the systems and processes that are in place to create better value to be able to go to market or to make sure that, with the groups that we're working with, the emerging groups, as they scale, to be more systematized, right? Put things in order and in place and to create that consistency in order to build a stronger culture, to focus on patient experience, which is all driven by team development. And that team development, you hear so much about, oh, it's difficult to find good people. Well, work on keeping the people that you have that you want to keep around. And that's by building a strong culture. And so when you've done that with your individual practice, with your emerging group, with what you've built up, finding the right transition for the right sale, for the right group, even if it's a private to private, for 3, 4 locations, whatever it is, or to a DSO, to honor the team members that you've built up in your own culture. And I just think it's so important. And I love that you use the word legacy. What's one thing that you've seen that if you said there's one thing to avoid, the biggest mistake, or I don't like to call them mistakes, I like to call them learning opportunities that you've seen and experienced in what you do, that you would say, this is the one watch out that I would say, just don't. Just this is the one thing that don't step your foot here that I see all too often.
Yeah, I think the number one thing that I see in that regard is sellers who are not ready to sell. Um, you know, Sellers who think they're ready to sell and they spend a bunch of money, particularly in a DSO transaction where, the costs are much higher from a legal fee standpoint and other fees and such, that they go through the whole deal and then they get to the end and then realize that they don't want to sell. And that puts, it's just time, money, and headaches, not only for them, but for everybody else that they've dragged through the deal. And, certainly, the doctor can't be worried about everybody else all the time. But I think it's important just to understand that there are other parties and interests involved, and that the doctor really can come to that conclusion before the time, money, and headaches of the transaction. For some doctors, they have to go through the whole thing to see it. But most of the time, in my opinion, that can be known beforehand. And, that's the biggest mistake, because there are certainly sellers that still do their deals. There are sellers that realize that they're not a seller and back out, but there are also sellers that realize they're not a seller and they still do their deal. And then, it's too late, and that there's a significant adverse impact at that point. So I think just being ready to sell, being a seller or true seller is important. We saw that a lot, I think, over maybe, 2 years ago or so, where there was almost like this fear of missing out amongst sellers who would see all their friends selling for ridiculous multiples, like you just mentioned, because money was cheap. And the idea seemed cool, and maybe just trying to keep up with what their friends were doing seemed cool, but really it wasn't the right fit for them, and or the right time for them. And so I think that's the number one mistake that I see, is that, because, if you're in a position to sell your practice, most likely, not always, but most likely you've owned it for quite a bit of time. And most likely it's your baby and you've grown it and it's the most important thing to you and probably your most valuable asset. So it's important to treat it that way and make sure that the timing is right.
Yeah, you talk about time, money, and headache. And, I talk about the fact that there's three things that are limited, whether it's in business, you know, personal life, you name it: time, talent, and treasure. And you're spending all three like very liberally if you're going through the process and you're not ready. And so even the questions before those questions of are you ready to sell, and having conversations and making sure that you're doing your due diligence before you even get to the point where you start your due diligence, right? The formal process. So I think it's really important that you called that out as the biggest mistake. It's the mistake before you even get into the process of are you ready physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually? Like, are you ready to at least go through the process where if all the things line up, that you are ready to pull the trigger and pull the trigger on the transaction itself? So I think that's really savvy and shows that you've done, you know, all of these. You do 300 transactions a year, and half of them are DSO and half of them are private. So that's really savvy of you. Thank you for pointing that out. I think it's really helpful for my listening audience. Well, David, this is the point of the program that every single guest plays a little something called What the Sleuth is Going On. It's 3 rapid fire questions. The first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready to play. Was that one of the questions?
No, it's not. That's the pre-question to the
Okay,
question.
got it. All
That's the
right.
pre-question, which is like, are you ready to sell if it all the
Felt like
numbers
I had to
work out
just
in
like
the line?
say yes or no really
So
quickly to that.
you set it up well. That was that was great. That was really well done. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that in like 120 some odd episodes. So see, always thinking, always think. I gotta watch out for you.
We'll see how well I do at the next part of this. But yeah,
All right. Question number 1. What's the worst bad breath you've ever encountered?
my dogs when I was growing up.
You qualify dogs growing up. What kind of dogs
Well,
did you
when I
have
was
growing
growing
up?
up, we had a dog. I don't have a dog now, but when I was growing up, we had a dog. I would say that dog's breath.
God, so wait, you don't have a dog now? You have what, a 6 and a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, you said? They need a
Yeah,
puppy.
we have cats. I know.
Oh, okay.
I think a puppy at some point.
All
Cats
right.
are a little easier, I
You're a
think.
cat house. All right. I want to make sure you have pets. I mean, there's so many good lessons to have pets when you have small children. There's so many involved. All right. I'll allow it. All right. Like you have to have permission for me to have pets. Suddenly now there's rules if you're a guest on the Too Smooth podcast. I don't know.
Well, I would
Question.
love to have a dog. So actually, I never thought of things that way. So it was cool. I mean, I think having a pet is important for kids. So that's great.
All the lessons, the responsibility, right? Caring for others, the unconditional love, all the things, right? Sharing, you name it. All right. See, you learned something. I taught you something. There you go. Knowledge is power. Question number 2. If you could change one thing about your smile, what would it be?
I think probably smiling more often would be what it would be. As a lawyer by trade, there's always the seriousness element, I think, and sometimes I catch myself during the day realizing that, it's okay to smile more during the day. So I think it doesn't stem from not being happy. I think it stems from, just being in the fire all the time.
So I would agree with that. When I first met you, I thought you were a very serious person overall. But as I've got to know you, I'm like, he's actually a pretty laid back guy. He's not like that serious all the time. So I would agree with your analysis that yes, I think smiling more would be a good thing. So see, that's second thing that you've learned. Who knew that like what the sleuth is going on would be so enlightening for you, David? I
I
mean,
know,
this has
right?
just been fantastic.
For sure. I got the bonus
Oh,
question. I
question
got the
number three,
really four
last and
questions. Yeah, go
final.
ahead.
Yep, I know, right? You're like, I can't even imagine what this one is going to reveal for me. Question number three. If you could go back and be the inventor of any dental product, and no, you can't choose your own if you've invented something, which one would you choose and why?
I don't know how I would change it or from an invention standpoint, but I know for a fact it would be floss, and just because nobody likes flossing that I know, but it's a necessity, right? So if flossing were made more, easier or more, like less of a burden, I would say, like, everyone brushes their teeth, right? I mean, that's just, what you do. But from a flossing standpoint, that's just like an extra element that you're putting on. And I think it'd be better if there was a way to do that easier.
Yeah, I love it. Floss has been like a
There
common
might be,
theme lately too on the Two Sleuth podcast. So yeah, absolutely. Well done. See, that was quick and painless, and you learned something. So there you have it. David Cohen
for
like
sure.
is like dropping knowledge and gaining knowledge at the same time during our running segment. I like it. So David, in the last few minutes, I want to respect your time and my listening audience's time. So is there anything I haven't asked you or that you'd like to share with my listening audience today?
I don't think so. I've just been appreciative of the time you've given to have me on here, and I've learned as well. Just kind of hearing your questions and the feedback from you, and it's been great. I do have one question for you before we leave, and that
Oh,
is,
he's going to turn
if
it around. Uh-oh. All right,
yeah,
I'm
I have
ready.
one question. One thing in the dental industry that you feel could be more efficient, um, what would that be?
Oh, one thing in the dental industry that could be more efficient. Ooh. Access to records for patients. If we could streamline their ability to know what's going on and like whether it's billing or like fee structure and their records with like their x-rays, so portability, I think that would be amazing. I think that's one of the
That's
biggest
cool.
hangups that I see. That would
Yeah,
make
that's
things
really
more.
interesting for me to learn because yeah, I wouldn't have known or thought of that. So that's cool.
Yep, I think there's some people working on it, and I'm excited about what they're creating and trying to create that transparency and portability. But I think that's something, yeah, that's what came to mind. So I love it. Thank you for asking me that question. My guest today on the Two Sleuth podcast has been David Cohen. He is the owner of Cohen Law Firm, specializing in helping dentists and specialists with their legal business transactional needs, including practice purchases, sales, partnerships, associateships. That's a tough word, and business structuring and formation. Thank you so much for being on the show. David, if they want to get a hold of you and learn about your services, what's the easiest way to make that happen?
Yeah, appreciate you asking the question. The best way to catch me is typically by email, and it's my name, David, at Cohen Law Firm, PLLC.com. So David at CohenLawFirm, PLLC.com. And
Perfect.
I'm very responsive.
He is very responsive, and we'll make sure that gets in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Two Sleuth podcast. And if you're just listening on audio, head over to the YouTube, click like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. But you've got to see the background of David and what he's got going on in the background today, because it is a beautiful scenery. So I just had to throw that in. Thank you so
All
much for
right.
being a guest today, David. I truly appreciate it. And I know it's been helpful for my listening audience. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
If you need help with converting lead calls into consultations, closing consults into more full arch cases, or creating a more strategic marketing message and branding for your practice or group, follow me for more tips or reach out to G&A Consult for a discovery call today.